Everyone has a story. It may not be glamorous or filled with adventure, but it's theirs. Welcome to Lyfting with Larry, the podcast that features the unique stories of everyday passengers from the world of rideshare.
Hi, and welcome to Lyfting with Larry. What's your story? Tonight, we're recording on the square in beautiful downtown Bowling Green, Kentucky. We're here at Spencer's Coffee Shop. They were kind enough to lend us some space tonight, and so we want to thank them very much. Personally, I think that Spencer's has the very best coffee in Bowling Green by far. Hands down, it's really no contest. Spencer's also has a lot of delicious food like sandwiches, baked goods, and all sorts of yummy stuff. So the next time you're downtown, make sure and stop by Spencer's on the Square. Tonight, I'm very excited about the podcast because we have a very dynamic young lady. She's a talented writer, and she's a recent graduate of Western Kentucky University. Although I haven't spent a lot of time with her, I really get the vibe that she's one of those people that other people are really just drawn to. So what do you say we get to know her? Catrina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind words, too.
Oh, you're certainly welcome. You're certainly welcome. It's all true. And we'll get into all that stuff before the night's over, probably. One thing I want to do at the beginning of the podcast, I forgot to do it on my very first podcast, but I want to kind of go over and see if you kind of remember the scenario, what was going on when I had you as a passenger.
Yeah. I don't remember, what we were, upset about, but I remember, getting into the car, and I'd heard of you before, and we get into the car, and I'm like, wait. I was like, this is Lyfting with Larry. And my two friends that I was with, Katie and Reagan, they'd had you before.
Right.
And so I was like, this is him. And we were all, we were intoxicated, for sure. I'll say that. And
I wasn't going to mention that, but I'll let you bring it up.
Yeah, no, it was just a Sunday evening,
right? Mm-hmm.
But we had got in and we were ranting and raving about men, which is a very creepy men at the bar.
Right, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say if our memories kind of meshed up. What I remember is when y'all got in. Like I said, I'd had Reagan and Katie as passengers before on Halloween night.
Yes,
because I remember them and they were dressed up. Reagan was a vampire, and I believe Katie was Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah,
if I remember.
So, yeah.
And but it's funny because when passengers get in the back seat, I'm kind of looking forward, and so I don't always get a good glimpse of them right when I get in. And they got in, and all of a sudden, one of them was like, Larry, and I turned around, and they're like, oh, you probably don't remember us, and I was like, no, I definitely remember y'all from Halloween, and all three of y'all was so sweet that night, and I've invited Reagan and Katie to be on the show.
Yeah.
Reagan said she's going to think about it, and Katie, I don't know, I haven't seen her.
I know.
I haven't seen her online lately.
I haven't seen her much. It's probably pretty busy.
I imagine. I'm sure. But yeah, and I think what had happened is some stalker dude had followed Katie to the bar.
Yeah,
and she was talking about him coming up and
he
getting up in her face,
bar to bar or something like that,
right.
And had confronted her for, I guess, not giving him the attention that she wanted or that he wanted.
What a loser, right?
Yeah, honestly.
All right. Well, so I think our memory's pretty well meshed. I think we're on the same page about that. That's cool. That's cool. Okay, so Catrina, so where are you from? What's your hometown?
I'm from here.
You're from Bowling Green?
Born and raised.
Okay, great. I wasn't born here, but I've been here since I was 7, so 45 years here in Bowling Green.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Yeah. So where'd you grow up? What school did you go to?
I have kind of a weird kind of start in elementary school. Okay. I moved after 3rd grade. I went to Briarwood.
Yeah.
And then I moved in 4th grade to Barron County.
Barron County, okay.
And I lived here the entire time, but we would commute from here to Glasgow every day because my mom taught there.
Okay.
So then we moved back in 8th grade, or when I was in 8th grade, and I went to Drake's Creek in Greenwood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in growing, when you get to the high school age, what kind of what kind of crowd were you in, or what kind of interest did you have in high school, or did some people were in bands, some people kind of different things?
I don't know. I would say it sounds so kind of like egotistical to say like we were pretty popular in high school, but we were like, and I don't think it was necessarily like, Greenwood was weird. We had like these people that were like upper class and popular, and then we had like more like which like I would think I would fit into that group, like not necessarily cliquey, like we would talk to everybody and we're like friends with everybody, but we were definitely like our own friend group and people like knew a lot about us. If that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was in yearbook too, which is how I got into like content creation and like writing and stuff. Like that's why I knew I wanted to do something in kind of my field.
Okay.
So I did that, like ran the yearbook, or ran like a section for the yearbook my senior year, which it was a bad yearbook. We were seniors in high school, so we didn't work hard on it at all.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so you graduated from Greenwood. Did you always know you wanted to go to Western, or did you look at any other schools, or? I
thought about going to UK, but I applied to Western. I got a full ride scholarship, or it paid my tuition for 4 years. And so I was pretty much like, why would I do
turn
anything?
that down?
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, my son was the same way. He got that at NKU, and so that's why he's there. He was in the Governor's School for the Arts.
Yeah.
And so they did that. So, yeah, so going into Western, it sounded like you had an idea that you might want to go into the journalism field, maybe?
Well, I'm a very indecisive person, so I was like, I know that I love writing. I know that I love, like, creating content and doing all this different stuff, but I want to make money. And so for some reason, I went into pre-veterinary school. And I dropped, I was like, after one biology
that out pretty quick.
One biology class, and I was like, never mind.
Gotcha. What was I thinking?
It was awful. But then I went into like advertising, like maybe this would be something more to my strengths.
Right.
And I went back and forth. Like I was like, I know that I want to write, but I want to make money. And I texted one of my old friends he was a college graduate, and he was like, you have to do what you want to do. And so then I switched my major to public relations and journalism writing as my minor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you get involved, with the Talisman?
It was 2016, I remember, because they had just done their last yearbook. And in 2016, we switched to a magazine and a website. And my friend told me, he was like, I think that you would fit in really well with it. I think that, this is definitely something you'll like. It's going to be a completely different vibe from, what you thought it would be and, or what you would imagine it to be. It's not like the Herald, which, all respect to the Herald, but it's, it's so much fun, and I think that you should definitely do it. And so I went out on a limb and applied, and I got it.
Well, so how many years were you on the Herald? The Talisman?
3 years.
3 years. Okay.
Yeah, 3 total years.
Wow. So during that time, what do you have any maybe kind of favorite stories that you wrote during the time? Because I read several of your articles that you wrote, and really enjoyed reading them. Yeah,
thank you. I think any personal thing that I did was dope. The first one that I did, it's called Claiming My Space, and it was about my journey as far as body positivity and stuff like that.
Right.
And I was like, this is when I was writing it, I was like, this is so stupid. They're not gonna want to read this. And it was the first we published it, and so many people reached out to me. So many people were so kind, and Facebook shares and all this stuff, and it felt so good to be, I guess, I don't know, validated in a way. And then I had a big journalism story, which it took me the entire semester to write, and it was about sexual misconduct.
I read that one too.
Yeah. And it was the hardest thing to do, but it paid off in so many ways. I learned so much doing that story. So those are my 2 big ones, I think. That's
great. It seems like just from the pictures I've seen on Instagram and stuff that the Talisman group is pretty tight and has a lot of fun and do a lot of things together.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's great. It's great to kind of, have that group where you kind of feel like you fit in.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there's a number of people that never really find that group, or they find it kind of much later in life. And I know going through school, my kids have sometimes had trouble finding their group. I had a little trouble, growing up finding our group. But when you find that and you feel like, oh wow, for the first time I feel like I belong here and I fit in, and
right.
It just changes your whole outlook on life when you have that kind of group that you can count on and
absolutely
hang out with and stuff. So that's great. That's great. I noticed one thing on your Instagram that you have in your profile is that you're a feminist.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to, what does that mean to you?
To me, it means a lot of different things.
Sure,
to me.
It's not something you can just put down in 2 sentences.
Yeah, it's a very evolving. I'm learning so much more about feminism and as far as inclusivity and I think it's more than equality to me. It's about uplifting, and I love to support women as far as their art and their work, and
right.
Making sure that everyone feels a big thing for me as a woman is to make sure my fellow women feel safe in whatever situation they are in. That I think is how I live out my feminism. Is if any guy is ever harassing my friends, I will. I've multiple times gone up to them and been like, okay, enough. At the bar, if someone, there was this man who was 45 and he was just staring at my friend dance. And I walked up to him and I was like, go away, right now. That to me, I don't know. It's just about strength and strength through each other, I think, to me, I guess. Yeah, I'd say so.
That's great. That's fantastic. I have 5 sisters and 3 daughters, so I've been around women a lot in my life, and grew up. My mom was a single mom, and so it was pretty much me and 4 girls growing up, and then my younger brother and sister came along when I was 15 and 17. So I'm kind of used to that. But that's wonderful, and I think especially the last, I'd say maybe 3 years. Things have just been changing. I mean, we have the Me Too movement that's been going on, and all this stuff is finally some light's getting shed on it.
Yes.
And it's just it's so different than it used to be, and just the attitudes I think of people are changing, and they're realizing that you can't do that. You can't act that way. You can't treat people like that anymore. I mean, I know we've obviously got still a ton of work to do and a long way to go, but at least we're making progress, I think.
For sure. And I think too, I should say, I don't ever want to be the kind of person that kind of stunts somebody's growth. I want to educate somebody. If they say something that's kind of wrong, I don't ever want to be you're an asshole, Right. I want them to be I want them, after interacting with me, to understand either a woman's side of you or my side of you or my point of view, I want them to understand why they said it was wrong and not just that it is wrong. If that
right, yeah, because if you just jump on them, that doesn't
help.
Do anything.
They're
it
just
going
to get mad.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then they're at this, in their mind, I think it probably even justifies, and they're like, oh, well, I'm obviously right about the way I thought about them because look what they just did. So that's a great attitude to have, and I think a lot of people don't do that.
Right.
Like you said, a lot of people, especially today, it seems like it's a thin line to walk sometimes. It seems like we get offended over so many things, but so many of the things that we didn't used to get offended over or didn't think was any big deal, now we realize that is a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, it's certainly a tough line to figure out sometimes, for sure.
Yeah.
But if more people had that attitude, because even when you disagree or you have a different viewpoint, you should be able to talk to someone and explain this is why I feel this way.
Yeah.
And I think we've gotten so far away from that in almost every area, not just politics, but whether it's politics or religion or the sexes or
Yeah.
whatever. It's like if you don't embrace my viewpoint, then you're my enemy.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
I don't know how we're ever going to get away from that.
I think an issue is like so many things are emboldened by like passion. So people feel really passionate about their side of view, but they don't want to listen to anybody else. You know, like it's not a conversation. It's more of a competition. Like, and I think that's why things kind of meet. They don't meet in the middle. They're just at a kind of stronghold, you know?
Right.
Like, people they're like, no, like, this is my life, and, like, this is how I feel, and this is my. And instead of having a conversation, they just completely steamroll over any progress that could be made.
Exactly. And I know I've seen this firsthand talking to people, and I've noticed it sometimes on TV when people are discussing or arguing about something. Someone will make their viewpoint, and like you said, it's often very passionate viewpoint. That's a firmly held belief, but then when it's time for the other person to talk, you can see that first person, they're thinking about what's my next point. Mm-hmm. They're going through. You can see the wheels turning in their head. They're not paying any attention to what the other person says.
Yeah, for sure.
So they're not taking any of that opposing viewpoint into view, and they're just set in concrete. Mm-hmm. And you've got to be able to listen. You've got to be able to hear somebody out. And even at the end, you say, okay, I've heard your point, but that doesn't change my view. I still feel this way. And we agree to disagree.
Yeah. Which I'm definitely not innocent in being like,
nobody is.
Yeah, I'm not going to listen to this guy because or this person because I don't agree with them. Like, I've always, I've thought that, but I've also matured in a way where it's clearly this confrontation is not working. This needs to be more of a working together and trying to figure out something that, how do we fix whatever's going on instead of just being like, you're wrong and I'm not dealing with it, you know? That's definitely me growing up, I think, a little bit.
Sure. And there are cases certainly where you shouldn't listen to somebody else's opinion when you get, when you're going up to the guy in the bar, the 45-year-old perv staring at your friend dancing, you don't have to have that discussion and let him explain to you why he's looking at your friend. That kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stop. Okay, well that's great. Like I said, nobody I think is innocent or very, very good at doing that kind of thing. Just because I think it's almost human instinct to want to defend your position, and at all costs sometimes, no matter what, and even sometimes. Later on, I know I've been at home and I was like, man, they had some good points, but in that time, in the heat of the moment, I couldn't even express that, or I couldn't even admit that to that person.
Yeah. So, confrontation and stuff like that, it's very hard.
Being
an advocate, it's hard, but it's something that, if you work at it, I think you can become stronger at it. But it's definitely not just a simple thing to do.
Sure.
Especially in social settings or anything like that. It's hard to just say, to kind of give or to even it's just a complicated situation
Certainly.
to go into.
So yeah, it's something that you have to, I think, continually be conscious about and continually work on. And start out with baby steps and kind of work your way into that, and hopefully, even as a country, we'll move in that direction where we can at least have discourse about things instead of my way or the highway, which is kind of what it seems like a lot of times now. So while you're at Western. Were there any other kind of activities or organizations that you were involved in, or do you have any hobbies that you really like, or what do you like to do in your spare time?
Honestly, if I'm gonna be 100% truthful, I didn't really do much. I did the Talisman. That's what I did.
Sure, then that takes a lot of time, I'm sure.
Too. Yeah, and I had a job as well, so that's mostly what I did. I worked. I wrote and I partied. That was basically it.
The three main things, right? Hey, well, Well, I'm sure you're not the first person who's gone through Western. It's been like that. I went there quite a long time ago, and there was a lot of people that did the same thing. You go to class, you work, and you party a little bit, and didn't have time for a lot else besides that.
Yeah. It's now that I'm out of college, like I'm definitely trying to fulfill myself in other ways, like outside of getting drunk and like doing stuff that's not healthy for me.
Sure.
But when I was in college, I was like, this is really all I have time to do and all I really cared to do, which maybe I'll look back and say that was a mistake, but I don't know. It's a weird it's a weird thing. Like, why not? I guess while I'm here, why not just be absolutely irresponsible? Because now I can't do that anymore. Now I have to start
grow up a little bit. So speaking of that, you are, again, congratulations on your recent graduation. That was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, thank you.
Was it a journalism degree?
I got my degree in public relations.
Public relations, okay.
And my minor is in journalism writing.
Okay. So I know we talked about this a little before the podcast, but I'll ask again. So what are your plans now that you're out of school? What would you like? What kind of area would you like to kind of head in? Not maybe a specific plan, but
well, I don't know. This is a bit of question that, as we talked about, I've gotten to every single person that's like congratulated me on graduating. Everyone's like, "What are you going to do now?"
Exactly.
I have no idea. I know that. I know I really would like. I don't want to live here for my adult life. Really, I want to move away. I don't know if I want to kind of start at a. I guess you would call it like starter city, like Nashville or something, before I go somewhere more expensive than Nashville. Right. I've always envisioned myself in living in Chicago.
Okay.
Which is a weird, I've never been, but I've always just been drawn to it in a way.
It's a cool place. I've been there, I don't know, probably half a dozen times.
Yeah. And this summer, I'm actually going to get to go.
Oh, great.
So I'm going to visit for the first time, see how it feels, and hopefully it'll be good. So that's definitely where I want to be. As far as, working, I became the writing web editor for the Talisman in my last semester, and I think that that's something that, that's what kind of field I want to go into. I had a public relations kind of internship, and I didn't love it. But every day I went into the Talisman office. I loved being there, and I loved editing, and it was so challenging, but I loved it so much. So I think that that's definitely where my heart is drawn to, is doing something like that.
It seemed. I mean, I've met just a few people from the Talisman and from the Herald, and everybody I've met there has just been really, really super nice when I've talked with them about about what's going on. I know they've always, ever since I was a kid, they've always had just a very good reputation nationwide, not just around here, but nationwide. So I know it's a good program, and I know they do a lot of good work over there. So I'm sure it was very kind of enjoyable, very fulfilling to be a part of that during your college years.
Yeah, student publications, I can't say enough good stuff about that building and those people inside of it. The most inspiring talent, I think. I've learned so much from every single person that I worked with, and people that worked for me, people that I worked for. Like I said, I can't say enough good stuff about it.
That's great. I ask a couple questions usually that are really kind of not related to anything, and so I'll bring those up in just a minute. But I wanted to see if there's just any particular story about your college life, whether it be something wild and crazy, or just a really special memory, or anything like that you might want to talk about.
In college, I think there's so many. I don't know. I don't know. Let me think. I think maybe what's really in the forefront of my head is the first game day I ever went to. my first like 2 or 3 years of college, I was like, I don't need to do any of that. And like, I don't really care about games, which I still don't really care about games. But I went to the first game day, like first tailgate, and this was right before they had taken it out of the Valley. So it was like one of the last semesters with the Valley. And it was just, college is honestly, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand how this culture has been cultivated over this many years. Like, people just absolutely trashed and like jumping on tables and standing on pickup trucks, and like it's like a jungle. Like, you're literally watching.
It really is. I mean, and it's so funny because I went to school. I went to Western. I started in '84, but I was doing factory work and paying my way through school, and so I went like maybe 1 year or a year and a half full time, and then after that I was taking a couple classes here and there, and I may sit out a semester, so I didn't actually get done until '97. So I tell everybody that I think they got together and decided, hey, we need to either give him a degree or we're going to have to name a building after him, one or the other. So let's just give him a degree and get out of here. But back then, football was nothing like it was today. Yeah. There was no such thing as tailgating at Western.
Really?
That was for like big schools like Alabama or things like that. Actually, I remember, I don't remember what year it is now because it's been a while, but they actually held a vote, and they were, if I remember correctly, the Board of Regents was one vote away from completely getting rid of football at Western.
No way.
Yeah, I mean it was close. It was. I think it was one vote, if I remember correctly.
That's insane.
This was back when we were, of course, I think probably still in the OVC back then, though, and we were kind of a much smaller program. And then it was such a turnaround after they the one vote, they decided to keep it, and then within a few years, Jack Harbaugh had, we'd won the Division II championship, and of course, as soon as that happened, they decided to go to the big league. And because when I was there, when I grew up, there was only one side of the stadium.
Yeah,
the old side, I guess they would call it now. So it was a lot different. But one thing that I remember from back then, that when I grew up, that was really cool. We always thought is they used to have a cannon down the end zone, and ROTC guys manned it. And whenever we scored a touchdown, they'd fire the cannon.
Oh my gosh!
And you always forgot about. I mean, no matter how many times you heard it, you always forgot because you're caught up in the moment, and all of a sudden, bam, and you jump. And then one other story I'll tell real quick about when I was really little. I was probably like, I don't know, 7 or 8 when we first moved to Bowling Green, and we were up in the stands. I remember my dad took me to a football game because he had graduated from Western. And we were up in the stands, and I looked over to the right and saw a train coming down the track, and I had no idea there was 2 tracks. And so I was looking, and there's a train coming from the other way, and I thought they were going to hit. And so I'm like tugging on my dad's sleeve, and I don't think I'd hardly even speak. And I was freaking out, thinking I'm getting ready to see this horrendous train crash, and then they just pass. And I was like, man, that was very anticlimactic. But funny things you do when you're a little kid, I guess.
Right, absolutely.
So yeah, Western has certainly changed a ton since I was a little kid. I talk to people all the time because so many of my passengers are students. Mm-hmm. When school's in session, probably 75% of my passengers are probably college students. Yeah. And when I used to live in North Hall, when I went there, and that area right behind us, I guess where they tailgate, or where they tailgate a lot now, between Grice Hall and North Hall.
Yes.
It was a parking lot. And that's where the teachers there parked. Just students couldn't park there. I remember I parked there once for a little while to bring some groceries in and forgot about it, and I think I got towed that night. So yeah, I mean, it's such a different campus now than it was back then. It was always a beautiful campus, and it's still a beautiful campus. They do a good job with that. But if they keep raising the tuition, I just don't know if anybody's going to be able to afford to go to college anymore. It's tough.
Yeah, it's crazy. One of my bosses at my old job, he told me like he went to college for like what was it? It was like $500 or something like that.
Mine was less than that when I started.
Yeah,
in '84, I think it was like, if I remember, it was maybe $375 a semester.
That's insane.
Yeah, it is crazy. I mean, by the time I graduated, I don't know how much it had gone up, but a ton for sure.
Yeah.
And now it's like I don't see how some of these people go into, come out of school with $200,000, $300,000 in debt. And they're an English major.
Yeah.
You're never,
right.
how are you gonna ever pay that off?
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Which I consider us kind of lucky. Like, my friend went to UK,
right,
and her tuition was $10,000 a semester.
Mm-hmm.
So like that, even though it's only double what we pay, it's still double what we pay.
Yeah,
that's insane.
I've got one son at UK too, and another one's going this coming fall. He'll be there.
Yeah,
and then we have three that are out of college. We'll have three in college, and we got two they'll be senior, or they'll graduate from high school next year. So, yeah, we got 8.
Goodness.
Yeah, that's a lot of college to pay for.
That's a lot of money.
It is. What can you do? We're just hoping. We figured out all those. One of them's gonna be rich and famous someday, and they're gonna take care of their parents and remember all those sacrifices we made for them. But maybe not. Who knows? Oh goodness. So like I said, kind of toward the end, I like to just ask a couple of questions that really don't have anything to do with your background or anything. It's just kind of questions I think are interesting. So I try to use a couple of them each podcast. So. So the first thing, if you could go back in time and talk to yourself when you were maybe 9 or 10, what do you think you would tell yourself if you knew what you knew now?
I think I would tell myself to be kind, not only to myself but to other people. I went through a phase where I was not as nice to people that really I had no reason to not be nice to. And that is like one of my biggest regrets as far as like high school and stuff like that, like thinking about how I was just like a stupid high school kid, and I was just kind of an ass sometimes, and for all the wrong reasons, And so I think like that's definitely something that I would tell myself, and also like be kind to myself. I was in elementary school, I was bullied, and also in middle school. So I think like not letting that get to me is something that could have been valuable for me, like when I was that age, to know to just be kind to myself and to remember to always like uplift myself in a way, I guess.
Sure. It's always an interesting question. I think all of us could go back and be nicer. We see it now. I mean, when you're in high school, and I see it, like I said, I have two 16-year-old high school daughters, right? And everything is such a big deal. I mean, the world's going to end if this certain thing happens or somebody doesn't talk to you. And you get out of high school and you realize, man, that meant like absolutely nothing in life. I mean,
right.
It really does. You get to college and you realize, wow, I mean,
none of this matters.
No, it really doesn't. I mean, but when you're in that, I mean, I know I think everybody's the same way. I know when you're in that moment and that's all you can see, you can't realize how much your world's going to expand once you get out into college.
Right.
And then you go back to high school reunions and you see people and there's always there's a few that they never grow up. They're doing the same things at the reunion that they were doing then. They're still getting drunk or stoned out of their mind and making an idiot of themselves. And then you see some people that this quiet person that you never really got to know because they were so kind of quiet or and kind of behind the scenes, and now they're the chairman of some company, and it's neat to see how people have changed over the years for the most part.
Yeah, for sure.
The second thing, talk about something or tell me something that you're just really passionate about, that you really spend a lot of time or thinking about or involved with, or when you speak to somebody about?
There is a story that I wanted to write at the end of this semester. I never really got the chance to do it. I would have to find a platform to do it, maybe like freelancing. But basically, when Western was expanding down the hill, this was back in late 50s, 60s kind of era, there was an entire black community, Jonesville, that basically the government bought the land and then they bought the houses from them at very low prices and basically wiped out the entire community. And I've seen some like coverage on it. I've seen people like talk about it, but I want to dive into it, and I want to talk to these people about like what happened. And we had a historian come to one of my classes a couple semesters ago, and he was telling us like a big issue as far as Black history goes is that, you know, we always, and that's like it's a cultural thing, like we'll listen to our grandparents like tell these stories, and we'll listen, and we're like, we've heard this story 100 times. But he was like, next time you hear something like that, write it down, because they'll die and then our history is gone. So stuff like that is very, like, I want to write that story, and I want to write it well, which is why I didn't really follow through with doing it at the end of the semester, because it wouldn't have been good enough.
Right, yeah, I didn't want to cram it in.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be able to do it justice in a short time. That's, I mean, I know about Jonesville, just from growing up here, being here for 45 years, but it's not something that you hear a lot about.
Exactly.
And I think that would be a super, super project, because, there's still people that you can talk to and get firsthand accounts on it, whereas, 20 or 30 years, it's going to be harder or impossible to find people who live through that and experience that, for sure.
Yeah. So it's something that I really want to get on, like maybe this summer. That's something that I will devote my time to, because like I'm still figuring out, like, I don't have anything to do. And it's like it feels different from any other summer before. Like, I'm realizing I really have nothing to do. So I'm hoping, like, if I can just get, like, I'm trying to, like, figure out how I want to tell the story. But, yeah, that's definitely something that I want people to read. I want people to know about it. I just want it to be told in the right way and not just to skim over this history kind of way.
Well, now see, I think there's an idea for your podcast.
Maybe, yeah. That would be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, you could actually talk to some of the people and, let them kind of tell their memories or whatever like that. So
yeah, that would be dope, like a little mini series, like talking to a few people about, like, there's the historian that came to our class. He's a WKU historian, John Harden, and then there's this woman, Maxine Ray, she's a historian over the, like, Jonesville. Like, she used to live there, and she makes sure that, like, the memory of that place is alive in this town. So yeah, that's something to think about for sure.
Oh, well, cool. Well, Catrina, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to see you again and to kind of learn a little bit more about you. One thing that I love about being a rideshare driver is getting to meet so many cool and interesting people. But Bowling Green's such a small place that I usually don't get a talk with them a long time unless I have them, several times. Which there are some people that I've had a dozen times, and you kind of get to know them. But a lot of the people that you'll have them once or twice in the rides, from downtown to Hilligan's, or you don't get a lot of time to really get to know them or get to talk with them or anything. But the night that I picked you and Katie and Reagan up, that, when I made that video for YouTube, that was one of the funnest rides I've ever had. That was really great. Y'all were all just so sweet and fun, and I'm so glad that you came on the podcast. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me and thinking of me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you again.
Yeah.
It's time for the interesting story of the week.
So this episode's interesting story of the week happened to me only about a week ago, so it's still pretty fresh in my mind. And it was one of the wilder experiences I've had as a rideshare driver, for sure. So it was a Thursday night, and I got a call to pick up a passenger at a bar called Tidball's here in Bowling Green. And I think it was a little before 2, if I remember correctly, maybe 10 till, something like that. And the passenger had a woman's name on there. So I arrived to pick up the passenger, and there's a guy there, and then standing next to a lady, and then like 3 more people are kind of close, and they're talking. So it looks like they're kind of together. And so the guy opens up the car door, and he gets in and kind of slides over directly behind me, because I think he thought that the girl he was with was going to get in as well. But they're kind of arguing a little bit, discussing about what to do, because he wants to go home. He's like, it's almost 2:00. There's nothing going on. I want to go home. And she wants to go to one of her friends' house. And the 3 other people that were standing nearby turned out to be her friends. And they're wanting to go to another friend's house, but he wants to go home. And so she during this discussion, she opens up the front passenger door and gets in and sits down in the seat next to me. And so they're discussing where they're going to go. And so she's like, okay, he wants to go home. She's like, I need to change the destination in the app, because I guess they had the destination as her friend's house where she wanted to go. And so she's not sure how to do that. So she hands me her phone, and I change, I ask the guy, where are you going? What's the address? And he gives it to me. So I put it in, and they're still kind of discussing whether or not, he wants to go home, or if she's going to go home with him, or what exactly is going to happen. And these are not college kids either. These were probably 45 to 50 year olds. And so anyway, the guy in the back, he asked to see the phone. I thought he was asking to look and make sure that the destination was correct. And so he's messing around with the phone, and she's starting to, she leans back kind of between that space between the driver's seat and the passenger seat. And she kind of leans through there talking to him, and he's got her phone still. And then all of a sudden she kind of just lunges through that crack into the back seat on top of him. and she's trying to get back there. And as she does, like naturally, like her head, the front part of her body kind of goes down on the back seat, and her butt's just pretty much sticking up in the air. And her dress is flying up. She had on a pretty short dress, and it's flying up. And the guy in the back just goes, he's like, what do you think you're doing? He's like, you need to get down. You're showing everybody your cooter. And I'm just trying to not, just completely die laughing up front. And she answers him back and says, she says, I'm not showing anybody my cooter. I've got underwear on tonight. and so finally she kind of makes it in the back seat, and she's kind of on top of him. And if this wouldn't have been my last ride, I knew it was, it was 2:00, and I had to go to work, my day job the next day. And so I knew this was going to be my last ride of the night. So otherwise I think I would have probably kicked him out pretty quick, but it was very entertaining. So I kind of let it go, and she's back there, and she's smooching on him, and her friends are coming over to the car, like, come on, we got to go. You need to get out of there. And so she opens the back door, and she's kind of backing out. And this guy, when he got in my car, he had on flip-flops. I guess he had kicked them off. And as she's backing out, she grabs his leg, I guess, kind of behind the ankle, and lifts his foot up and sticks his toe in her mouth and bites it. Like hard, like really hard. I was looking forward, and all of a sudden I hear this guy just scream out in pain. And I turn around, I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea. I know she stabbed him or, what was going on. And she's just, she's looking at him holding his foot and she's just laughing. I mean, hysterically laughing. And he's like, did you see what she did to me? That crazy girl bit my toe. And I didn't know what to say. I mean, and so she's laughing and she finally backs out. And he's not happy about her having bit his toe. So she finally gets out of the car. Friends get her out of the car and they shut the door. And he's like, would you look at that crazy woman? And I look back and this girl has pressed her face up against my window, just like a kid does. You know how they press their face up and smush their nose and make funny faces? Well, she presses her face up against my window and she licks like pretty much my entire window. And just licking it. And then she starts making these kissy sounds at him. And I'm afraid to drive off because I'm afraid I'm going to run over her foot. So in order to fix this, I reach over to my window controls and hit it real quick. And the wind starts to go down, which causes her to jump back. And I just take off because I just went out of this situation. And so I'm like, I'm talking to the guy. I'm like, who in the world was that? And he's like, I don't have any idea. I just met her tonight. I thought they had like a long friendship or dating or something going on, but apparently they just met that night. So anyway, yeah, that was definitely a unusual and weird story. I don't think I've ever seen anybody bite somebody else's toe or lick a window. But Rideshare, you never know what's going to happen. Every night's an adventure. That's for sure. Thanks for listening to this episode of Lifting with Larry. What's your story? I want to thank Spencer's Coffee Shop once again for letting us use some of their space. I want to thank Catrina for being such a wonderful guest on this episode. It was great to see her again and talk with her and get to know her a little bit more. And I really look forward to seeing what's in her future. If you're interested in listening to another rideshare related podcast, be sure and check out my friends at GR Rideshare Adventures. Those guys put on a great podcast. They're always funny. They're always very informative and just put on a really, really great show. As always, thanks, God bless, and be safe out there.
Thank you for listening to Lifting with Larry. To subscribe to the podcast, check out other episodes, and keep up to date, head to liftingwithlarry.com.